Ah, the joy of driving down the road full of speed humps. We all love that, right? There are a few things you could do to make it less painful though. First two tips are basic, for learners really. If you're looking for an advanced driving technique involving weight transfer, scroll to this time. When you inspect a speed hump up close, the first thing that comes into mind is that not every part of the speed hump is the same height. You can take advantage of that. The sides of the speed hump are usually much lower than the middle of it, and you can use that to bypass the highest part of the speed hump. That way, your car will have to traverse a much smaller incline, and you will feel that as a much smaller bump. Pretty much you have two choices for that. You can either take the speed hump between the wheels, or you can try to go between the speed humps and make sure that each wheel goes on an incline of a different speed hump. In the first case, be careful if your car has low clearance, because you may scratch the bottom of your car with the top of the speed hump, or even worse, rip off the bumper. Okay, but even if you take the speed hump perfectly and guide your car on the lower part of it, you still need to slow down, at least for most of those speed humps. And here is where the second tip comes into play. Never brake on the speed hump. Always slow down before the speed hump and then release the foot brake just as you're about to hit the speed hump. Why? Because when you hit the brakes, the mass of the car shifts forward. You can feel that as a sensation of being pushed forward. That's when you can sometimes feel your seatbelt is holding your back. And the same happens with the whole mass of the car. And that means the front of the car becomes heavier and it may dip down a little bit on the suspension. So the front of the car lowers down. And that means the springs in the front suspension contract and they are less able to absorb the impact from the speed hump. Basically, you're trying to squeeze a squeezed spring. It's not gonna work. It's the worst thing you can do. Brake as you're hitting the speed hump, as you're mounting the speed hump, because then the suspension gets double whammy. It's contracted from the top by the mass of the car, the increased mass at the front of the car, and it gets hit from below by the speed hump, by the unevenness of the road. And I see people do that all the time. So now that we're talking about weight transfer, you can use this to our advantage. When you brake, the mass of the car shifts forward. Springs in the front suspension contract, you're less able to take the impact. Been through that. But what about when you're accelerating? What happens with the mass then? Well, when you're accelerating, you're being pushed into the seat. So that means the mass of the car shifts backwards. And when the back of the car gets heavier, the front gets lighter. And if you have soft suspension, then the front of the car will lift ever so slightly. Also, the springs in the front suspension are gonna expand. And that means they are more able to absorb the impact now. And thus, the impact itself is much gentler. Not to mention for low-riding cars, the front bumper will lift ever so slightly up as well, making it less likely to scratch the speed hump. Obviously, you need to time it just perfectly to get it right. So basically you're braking before the speed hump, and then just as you're about to enter it, you start to add acceleration. Obviously, the more acceleration you add, the bigger weight transfer you'll get. But don't overdo it because you don't want to hit the speed hump too fast. It's not easy. So remember, practice makes perfect. First few times, you may not even feel the difference at all. But once you start timing it just right, once you nail it, then you'll feel much more comfortable at traveling through speed humps. The comfort of driving through the speed hump will be much higher. So go out there, give it a try, see how it goes. Let me know in the comments how you did and how it felt. If you like the video, please hit the like button, maybe even subscribe. That really helps a lot. And as always, thanks for watching. Drive smart.